Hello, hi, thanks for coming. This is very exciting. Cotter, thanks for joining me.
Of course.
And thanks for thinking about my book, picking up the book. It was very fun to write. I started it, I think, in December 2021 and wrapped it up about this time last year. So it's been ready to go, and I'm super excited to talk to you all about it. It's going to be kind of like a free-form conversation about like how we got into this music scene, what we're thinking is happening today. Cotter has a really amazing vantage point, being in Goose right now. I just saw them a few weeks ago at Madison Square Garden with Goose, and here we are a couple weeks later at Phoenix Books. We were talking a few moments right back there about first shows and when we first got into them, and we come from a different. I don't want to say generation, but I saw my first Phish show in 1994, and I was in college at Blacksburg, Virginia, and I was just enamored with this. The scene, the music that was coming out of it, all the acts. I wasn't just one band, it is my band. I was, kind of like anything and everything. Cotter, I was curious about your, how you got into Phish, how you got into more improv rock, like what you were doing when you found them.
I was in high school.
Yeah.
My dad was a jazz musician, which I always loved the music, but it was like a really snobby vibe that went along with it, especially because he went to Berkeley, and in the 80s there was kind of this competitive, like, don't mess it up kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But the principle of improv music I always loved from when I was a little kid. And when I was in high school, my buddy it was 2009, and Phish had just come back after the hiatus. And he was like, "You want to go see this Phish show? If you bring the weed, then I'll give you the ticket for free." And so I did, and I had no idea what to expect. I asked him, like, "What's up with Phish? Are they any good?" And he said they have this great song called Farmhouse on the radio, which in hindsight is very funny. And so yeah, when I showed up to Fenway, it was just like this immediate wild scene. I had no idea that the culture even existed, and it blew my mind. It was a great show. I still listen back to it. And then when I got home, I downloaded a bunch of Phish on LimeWire, and turned out it was a bunch of Big Cypress jams. And so then I just got deeper and deeper. And then there was no real hippies in my town. I grew up in a really small town in Mass. And so I tried to play jam band music, and it wasn't until college when I found some other huge Phish head hippies, and we started jamming, like just playing Phish songs and Dead songs. And like, I ended up getting really more into the smaller bands in the jam scene than Phish for a while too. There was just a great scene in the Northeast.
Like who?
Dope Pod was my favorite band, and two of them now live here, and I get to play with them all the time, which is a dream come true.
Sure.
And there was a ton of great bands, especially in that early 2010s era. There was just a lot of festivals in farmlands or whatever that were probably like 1,000 people and great music. And then my crappy college jam band started getting on the lineups for those, playing early in the morning so we could go hang out and watch the other bands for free. And and the rest is history, really. I was hooked.
So a lot of the early parts of this book talk about the kind of this DIY mentality that a lot of the acts had. I was wondering about, you're talking about, finding people you want to play with, getting on the early morning stages. Is the DIY mentality, like, has it always been running through this thread? Like, Trey told me in his interview about how he would see like Fugazi here, and you know, he doesn't play music like Fugazi, right? But he was seeing like what they were doing with community and fandom and you know, keeping ticket prices, you know, low to like get people come in, all age, all that sort of stuff. So I, you know, one of the great things about the book is that it has this like lineage of DIY that I don't think a lot of people around, you know, around the scene, especially in the 90s when labels and radio were involved, really necessarily knew about, but it was there.
For sure. I mean, I read the Phish book, I forget what it's called, but it kind of spelled out how intentional the community building was by them and how like organic it was, like the Amy's Farm stuff.
Sure.
Sending out, like having like a mailing list, which in my opinion is way more personal and cool than posting on Instagram, but you know, that's can be cool too. But like just that and they had the magazine and like showed all different types of their like parts of their personality, and it built a world around the music and a culture that obviously built off the Grateful Dead counterculture, but it was, especially around here before they blew up, it was like this really local, amazing group of friends that just kind of snowballed. Like the story about them selling out Paradise in Boston. They hired the buses to bring people down from Burlington. Their scene sold out another market in Boston with their fans, but then all the other people that are coming in are like, wow, these guys must be something big. They have a huge following. And that's how they you know, built their other markets. It's genius, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, do you see parallels with Goose right now doing things like that? I mean, it's a different era, obviously. It's algorithms and feeds and posts and all that sort of stuff. But community still, I feel like it's still the way to go.
For sure. I mean, it's super important to the band. And it bums us out that, you know, even though we are independent, you know, we're not like, you know, our moves aren't dictated by a record label or anything like that. We're not like that level of corporate. But when you get, there's certain aspects where it's like, yeah, I guess like this is the corporate way and it's the way that it's gonna sell the most tickets or get the best reach. But recently, especially, we kind of reworked our whole social media to be like more personal and less like we're a company trying to sell you stuff. To be like, come hang out with us. We do like at our fest in Mexico, I refereed a volleyball tournament. And like, I mean, especially me, I am just out there because like a year and a half ago, I was just a broke musician in Burlington. And so I don't feel like I'm any different than the crowd. And I think the other boys feel the same. I mean, obviously Rick gets a little more mobbed as the star and the guitar player, so I can get away with being more mingling with the crowd. But Peter too is really conscious of connecting with the community in whatever way we can. I think it's tough because I also wasn't there for their building process. I kind of joined right when things got great, so I got lucky there. But I did it with Swimmer,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and we were really pulling from all the stuff that Phish did in Vermont and the Dead did in San Francisco, even though it's very different too, but similar, you know, approach there.
Yeah, another thing that the book talks about is a lot of like what Cotter's saying now. Bands in the 90s were doing the exact same thing with Phish. Like Strange Folk here was emulating Phish. They were talking to their management, talking to them about how to navigate record deals. They also were looking at bootleg tapes that were going around, right? And they sometimes would have like interesting venues that they'd never heard of, especially around here in the Northeast. And they would look to those as places where they should book, or at least call and say, hey, if you like this, which clearly you did, we have a following, and people are coming to our shows, and we can bring people to those shows as well, which it's just an amazing use of savviness and resources. They were very hip to the mailing lists. Sign up here, and we will not. Email became a thing, but it was sending postcards. The God Street Wine guys would tell me that their theory around postcarding was, it would get people to know their dates and know when they're coming to town, but people would slap them up on the refrigerator as like a reminder, as a calendar, and go to like college towns or whatever, and you have all these kids passing through your house all the time, and you have a calendar up with your name. Like, it's just like these ways that were so underground to get your name out, but they would do kind of everything to do it. The Disco Biscuits, when they were first starting out, they would go to Phish parking lots, and they would hand out a flyer for their show to every single person, and then they would stand there and wait till the show was over, and then they would, as the people were streaming out, they would be handing out the flyers again. And Mark Brownstein was like, people would tell us, we get you Disco Biscuits, we're like, we have a flyer, we got it. Like, there's just like this relentless, I don't want to say attack, but like, it was just like such motivation to get your name into the scene and have people check you out. Another great story he told me too was at the Garden for one of Phish's New Year's shows, like 98 or 97. They had like a little street team, if you will, of folks that were that had flyers for their after show, and it was at this really tiny place in the city. But they were like gross green, right? They were like these neon green flyers. And he had people stand at the top of every aisle, and at set break, those people would like walk down and just had so many flyers, just handed a stack of flyers and said, pass it down. And he could see at the top of the stadium, like 15 minutes later, the entire lower bowl of the Garden was just like this fluorescent green with Disco Biscuit flyers. And I was like, did anybody go to the show? Like, was it packed? And he was like, no, like maybe 120 people showed up. But it was thousands and thousands of people at that moment. They at least knew who our name was, right? No label, like could barely get the Wetlands to talk to them. And I don't know, it's just like these DIY things that, I think Goose was doing, what you said before you joined, but they still like, a currency for the fan these days, like it used to be like the autograph. Like I remember, standing outside of buses, standing outside behind clubs, getting autographs from people on like a ticket stub. It was like the greatest thing ever. Now it's a selfie, right? And the Goose, the Goose guys certainly seem to indulge with that as much as possible, which is like, it's a great thing.
Sure. Yeah, and the autograph thing is definitely still there.
Okay, that's great.
Although it's like you have to sign posters before the show, and it's like 25 that people, whoever really wants them can buy them. But I always feel like you're just ruining the art of the poster. Like a shitty signature on the poster. So I think it's kind of silly. I have terrible signatures, so. But yeah, and the selfie thing, and like, being out, the majority of people who come up to me like are really kind, and they just want to like say their piece about how much the music means to them. Get a quick selfie, and I know that means a lot because like I remember seeing Paige at Nectars with George Porter for Jazz Fest, like I don't know, pre-COVID sometime, I forget when, but I waited a while just like asking for a selfie. And he said no, but he was very nice about it. He was like, it's gonna be a shit show. If you get a selfie with me, then everyone's gonna start lining up. And I was just like, yes, of course. It was a great show, man. That was amazing. But yeah, I mean, we're always down for that stuff. And like, obviously it can be a little overwhelming, because like, sometimes just like, you need a second to breathe. But for the most part, our fans especially are super kind.
You were talking earlier when we first got here about like meeting a few of the people that are in the book, Derek Trucks and O'Teal. Have you played with them?
Yeah, I haven't played with O'Teal. I really want to, because he's basically just like, he's a mixture of Barry Oakley and Phil, and then his own flavor.
Yeah.
He's a genius. Everyone who was in that era you met with Colonel was a genius musician. But yeah, so my meeting him was brief. Derek, I got to play with a couple times, but we played together at that MSG Dave Matthews show.
Right.
And like we got to hang out before the show. That backstage scene was wild for me. Because it was like first time at MSG. There's all these people that I've been looking up to my whole life. Like Warren is sitting next to me at the dinner table with Joe Russo. And they go back to the green room and Derek and Susan are in there learning one of our songs. It's like, this is pretty,
Like, what is happening?
pretty wild. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing has been a super trip for me, for sure.
So, you know, you're talking about Derek, O'Teal, Warren, you know, they were, you know, some of the pinnacles of this, you know, the 90s era. Have you noticed anything about like them, like, to me, when someone plays for this amount of time, the amount of skill that they can acquire is, I don't know how to describe it. You know, like none other, it sounds kind of dorky, but like, there's just like, you know, you were at Phish the other night.
Yeah,
You know, like you're watching them, you know, like they're locked in like in ways that years and decades
oh yeah,
affect your playing and creativity.
for sure.
I don't know what you think about. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think, like, you know, across the board, you know, like, for Warren, for example, who isn't really, like, a jam band guy, per se. I mean, it's kind of like that Allman Brothers, like, line there. I think it's just like a wisdom and, like, a power, where it's like, you can affect people emotionally with your music by doing less, because, like, the power of what you're doing is, like, the magnitude of that has gone up. And your legacy behind you, and like, you know, those guys aren't messing around. They were rehearsing the entire time before their 30-minute set at MSG. And like Dave included, amazing dude. Also, all of them really kind, just like humble dudes who aren't there to be like, I'm the shit. They're there to play music and spread the good word, you know, like keep the community going. I think with Phish and the Dead, and I know this from experience with Swimmer, it's just like playing with the same 4 people that much, you get this like, it feels like a telepathic bond, where it's like you start to really understand what people's language is and how they're developing as musicians without talking about it, just hearing and learning from each other in moments that are like those chaotic, unpredictable improv moments, especially in front of a crowd. Because like, there's the best music. I was talking about this the other day with someone. I was talking about Phish a lot yesterday with someone. It's like, with improv, especially in front of thousands of people, you could hit these marks where you're like, oh shit, what's going on? What is he about to do? And then you hear like one tiny little detail and you're like, oh, okay, I know what he's doing. And then what comes out of these like uneasy moments is often like the best improv moments that lead to something really great. And like, especially the early 90s Phish, I feel like just on a dime. Like they'd be like a little lost in a jam, Trey would hit like one tiny lick and they would immediately catch on and be like, all right, we're doing this now. And just so sharp and so connected. And now it's more like, it's less like piss and vinegar vibes than the 90s, but it's more like this wise storytelling vibe. And like they're creating this tapestry together. And they're just, the chemistry is wild.
You know, I remember, you know, back in the 90s around the scene, and people would be talking about Trey and whatever, and they'd be like, you know, he's a guitar god, these guys are gods, you know, and which kind of insinuates that this is innate. Okay, and maybe some of it is, I don't know. I don't know about what is innate and what's not. But what I do know is their commitment to practice, even in the early days. Like, I spoke to Sean Sweeney, who started the front here back in the 80s, which Phish graduated to. And he was telling me how, like, on like weekends, like the bar wouldn't even be open, right? And he would just be like doing the books and, you know, running up and down the street, stocking beer, whatever. And the band would just like ask him if they could come by and play. And they would play for hours and hours and hours in front of no one. Okay? And like, these are like 20-year-old kids, right? That have like this dedication to this craft. And it's not like they're going in the studio and messing with things for 8 hours every day. It's expensive, but they're also like, you know, going to where they want to perform that day or that week or whatever, and just doing it. And then so to hear you say that, you know, 30, 35, 40 years later, like the same people are still like committed to that that practice and like getting things right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple points there. Like with Swimmer, I was in my 20s. I was like, I got an environmental science degree, and I was like, I don't want to do that for a living. I think it's awesome. It was great to learn about. But I started a band in college. It was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm moving to Burlington, where Nectars is, and I'm going to play Nectars. And to do that, I knew it was like my dad's a musician. I didn't think that it was going to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to go there and kick some crunchy grooves and people are going to love us and we're going to get famous. I knew like immediately, like once you get into it and then you start to get a gig, it's like this chaos of like, there's no security, and there's so many ups and downs, like so many wins and losses, that it's like really becomes addictive. And then you're like, I just need to keep working harder and harder, especially when you get knocked down, which happens to, you know, even like Phish and Goose, I'm sure. Like, it happens to every band. You kind of go through it, but when you're building the band, it's just like, I was obsessed with practice. And like, I was like, if you don't practice as hard as you can and work as hard as you can and make as much sacrifice as you can, there's no chance that you'll make it. And even if you do those things, there's still a slim chance that you're gonna make it. But it's like the greatest journey ever. It's, in my mind, it was like, this beats just some job, right? Go in, clock in, and you know, I'm sure people have regular jobs that they love that, you know, brings them a lot of joy. But for me, it was like, this is it for me. And I think that it's not innate. Like, that stuff is like, I mean, maybe, I feel like it's like once you get the bug, and then you're like, this is for me, there's no other option. That's like what makes every musician that's ever made it. Maybe not like the glamorous pop stars or whatever. I don't really know about that scene. But I feel like the only way to make it, the way I did and a lot of the bands in your book did, is to be like, this is it. There is no other option. I can fail 1,000 times and I'm still gonna keep going for it. Even if I'm getting smoked online, whatever. You know, just keep doing it. And like, yeah.
Yeah. There's a great story in here about, if y'all are into the band Mo, you know, Mo was on Sony Records in the late 90s, and they got a hefty check to be on Sony. And Sony paid attention to them for their first record. And then their second record, for whatever reason, they just wanted to get them in and out, like fulfill the contract, and they did, and so they essentially got dropped pretty quickly after that second record came out, and you know, Al from Mo was telling me how bummed they were, like they were kicked down, right? And they didn't really understand like what they had done wrong. They're like, why didn't they make it, and why are they so like excited about them? And then only to turn on them. It made no sense. And what I didn't put in the book, because it was after the year 2000, after 1999. But he told me like 6 years later, Mo ended up selling out Radio City Music Hall for 2 nights. This was right around 2006. And he was like, you know, that made me feel so great. Of course it would. But he was like, and I still don't, it just made me think that like, I still don't understand why they didn't like us, right? Like, we didn't even need them, and we got to this level. They could have had something that is selling out Radio City Music Hall if they had stuck with us, and they didn't. And there's other stories in there too about other bands that suffered what what Cotter's describing as like these kind of kickdowns, I guess, where like things don't go your way, and you have to either make that decision, right? You have to make the decision of like, all right, do I stop or do I keep going on, right? And you know, all of these acts, what is great about them to me, what is great about Goose is, at the end of the day, they didn't need they didn't need radio, they didn't need a label. A lot of them had it, but they didn't need it. They knew that if they could play live and people loved to see them live, they would come back. They keep coming back, and you know, 25, 30 years later, you know, they still are.
And I feel like that's kind of the beauty of the jam scene compared to any other scene, is that it gives you hope. Like when I was like a young hippie in my like early 20s, the thing that gave me the most hope about doing well was like, I was like, this is a scene where people are just coming out because they love music, and the people who are playing the music are doing it because they love music, and also in an environment where they're kind of free to do what they want, which was it was way more rare in like the record company structure. I mean, like there's like, you know, there's a story about Zeppelin, like Dusty Springfield's brought in John Paul Jones, and she got them their first record deal, and it was like no singles, they can do whatever they want, and like then they put out Stairway, and the radio stations were like, no one's gonna want to hear a 9-minute song on the radio, and then it was the most requested, and it kind of broke that system. But for the most part, that's how it was. Is you put out your single, and then you'd be boxed up and sold as a
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the jam scene, it's like you have a crowd of people that wants to find out what's gonna happen that night with you, and it gives you the freedom and safety to just go for it. And like, I love the Biscuits because they're the epitome of a band that just goes for it. And even if they crash and burn, they just keep going. Whereas, you know, Phish will kind of pull a plug and be like, let's move on from this. And the Biscuits will be like, no, we're staying here. We're gonna make everyone as uncomfortable as possible. So it's, as an exercise in musical freedom, the principle of that is amazing. And you know, I love the Biscuits, I saw them a ton. But they're the epitome of that principle there.
Yeah, Dave Schools from Widespread Panic, there's a good story also in here about how Capricorn back in, they were the first act, Widespread Panic was the first act to be signed to the relaunched Capricorn in the early 90s, and you know, they were pushing a song at radio, and Capricorn came to them and was like, yo, you gotta play this song every night. This is our radio song. There's gonna be people at the show that heard this on the radio and they want to hear this song. And he was like, we would never do that. We would never do that. That sounds so boring. Yeah. And our fans would hate that. Like, so they were very in tune with the notion that what you're describing, where there's a fandom that loves difference, right? And they love that no two nights might be the same.
Yeah, the unexpected.
The unexpected, and yeah, you do want to come back.
For sure. You get hooked. Because you need to know what's going to happen the next night. You want to know if they'll play that song that you've been searching for. It's better if they don't play it for the first 30 shows you go to, and then you finally get it. And it's this beautiful moment of like, oh man, I put in the work, and this is like a special moment that feels personal. It feels like the jam gods have chosen me tonight, or whatever, you know, like there's all kinds of moments like that I've had with Phish and a bunch of other jam bands, where it's like, feels like it's way bigger than like, oh, I love this song. Oh, I love this chorus. I sing along to it in the car. It's like this moment, you know, especially when you involve psychedelics, honestly. But you like, not to say that jam bands are not good without psychedelics, because I do not do that anymore. When I was a young buck, I would have these like these magical moments at shows that were because of the music, because of my perspective, for sure.
Do you remember the first night you played Nectars?
Yeah, I do. And it was actually when Sergey passed away, who was like my absolute dear friend. We hadn't moved, we were still in college together in Plymouth State, New Hampshire. And we finally got a Nectar show because we had a friend here who was doing something. He was like the head of the street team. And we were so excited to play Nectars. And it was a Tuesday night before Dead Set was going on, and it was packed, and we were terrible. Like, we were a band that would just jam with no direction, and just kind of maybe go into a lick from one song, and then just keep jamming, and just, but we kind of cut our teeth on house parties, because there was no clubs to play in Plymouth, like, campus. So we just play house parties, and we got really good at driving energy, bringing this like wall of sound. And so we were doing that, and we thought we crushed it in the first set. People were going crazy, and then at set break we were out back smoking, and Sergey just like kind of casually walked up and was like, yeah, I guess I come from a time when bands didn't just play over each other the whole time. And we're all just like, oh shit. And he was right. But we were so hyped, and it was like kind of that brutal Russian honesty that made us end up loving him. And then we also obviously learned that he had a heart of gold, and he was just no filter, and that was just kind of who he was. But yeah, that was like, I'll never forget that moment with Sergey and our first time playing Nectars. And in the second set, we were way more conscious about how we were playing, and I think that stuck with us until, you know, from then on, for sure. And like that, like, and then the second time we came back, Sergey bought one of our t-shirts, and every single time until the day he died, he would wear that t-shirt when any of us would play Nectars, not even our band. Any of us individually would play with any other band, he'd wear a swimmer shirt. And it was like, yeah, it was really special. It felt like we had to improve our sound to gain his respect. But yeah, that was an amazing night for sure.
Look, sometimes like literally one sentence can be like what you need to change things around.
Yeah.
You know?
It was just like, he was, and like, you know, I don't want to go on too much about Sergey, but it was just like, there's no people like him. He's the only one like that I've ever met in my life. And he was like the heart of Nectars in my time, at least, you know? But the reason I moved to Burlington was because of Nectars.
Yeah.
And when I moved here, the scene did not disappoint at all. It was
Yeah.
a beautiful music scene, and I had some of the best times of my life. And we would like then go on tour across the country, and we were so spoiled at Nectars. Once we became like one of the staple bands in town, then we go on tour and we're like, the music scene everywhere else in the country sucks, because Burlington is just where it's at.
Yeah.
For our kind of music. All kinds of people. Like I was telling you before, it was like Nectars had metal Mondays, they had all kinds of music, and they had music most nights of the week. And that would like create this scene that mixed a lot of different scenes together. Like we had guys at our show that just saw our poster at Metal Monday and would come in like studded leather jackets, and they would stay the whole show and have a great time. And like that was a moment for me where it's like, oh man, we're mixing the communities together, and it's just music fans here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really special.
It's been great. Do you all have any questions you want to ask? Anything top of mind? Yeah.
Your love of biscuits, you fed it to Goose back in a couple months ago, and you just like put fluorescent flyers through the Goons, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
It's a whole new influence for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way Rick likes to put it is like weapons in the arsenal. And so it's kind of like different zones, musical approaches that we can kind of just have in the back pocket. Obviously there's moments in the show where it's like, we kind of like, it'll just be like free space zone. But then now we have the like, what do you call it? The like Livetronica vibe going. Super inspired by the Biscuits. And when I joined the band, I had some insight about how they did things. I've talked to Brownie in the past about like how they set up with the click track and backing tracks involved, and how they can use them, like add them, subtract them during jams. And so it's not just like pressing play on a laptop and having it in your ear. It's like you can build parts, synth, like arpeggiators, all different kinds of sounds, and use that to develop the jam by having a click track in your ear. And I was explaining to the Goose guys how the Biscuits were doing it, and then what really solidified it was when we played Jazz Fest with them,
Right.
and we did that, whatever it was called.
Foie gras and croutons.
Which was super fun. The Biscuits guys are a great hang, and
Plus,
and-
they'd never played cross-eyed before. So.
really?
Yeah, because they were avoiding Phish material, and you brought them into it, and they thought it was wicked.
We want to play that song so bad with Goose, but it's the jam band code that if another jam band covers the song, then you're not allowed to cover it, unless it's like a one-off.
Your
Or
one-off
if it's
work.
like, okay, Ozzy died, like we all play this one sad song or whatever, but we aren't allowed to play Cross-Eyed, which sucks. So then I just wrote a stupid song that sounds like the Talking Heads, and now we play that with Goose. I don't know why they like that one.
Which one?
It's called My Mind Has Been Consumed by
I
Me,
got it.
which I wrote by myself on a computer for all MIDI instruments during COVID when I was losing my mind, and going on like Instagram, like I'm going to die here on this horrible social media loop that I'm in. It's like dopamine loop, and so then I wrote that song, and they loved it for some reason.
I don't want to dominate this, but in New Hampshire, when you started Draconian Meter Maid, I thought it was going to be a 4 or 5 minute toss off, and it went for 15 minutes, and I went, man, they love his song.
Well, yeah, that was like Swimmer's, like, it was like our bathtub gin. It was like a song where it was like, yeah, we play the song, and then we see where the jam goes. So that was one of our most stretched out songs with Swimmer. And so then the Goose Boys fully embraced that spirit for the tune. And side note, that's actually about a parking lady in Burlington. When I worked at Leonardo's Pizza, she would nail me every time I parked there for 2 seconds delivering a pizza, making no money. And she'd hit me with a $75 ticket, and then like I'd like run in and deliver a pizza, and I'd come out and she'd have the tow truck there towing my car. And she'd be like, pay me like whatever, $600 right now, and then I'll take it off the truck. They'd be like, I lost money going to work today. I tried being nice, tried being like, can I get you a coffee? And she was like, no. She was just so.
Thank you.
Thus, Draconian.
So my question is about cover bands. My buddy Charlie got asked by Chris Farnsworth, the music columnist for 7 days, how many dead cover bands are there in Vermont? And he came up with a smaller number, but it ultimately came up with 37. And that's a long intro
Wow.
into what about cover bands or jam band adjacent? Someone that comes to mind is Rack, who I once heard described as the best band that never made it.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Fucking
Those guys are
fantastic.
crazy. That's why
Yeah, I know, right? Machete is amazing.
they're two, dude.
But,
Todd Stoops. Good
or,
Lord.
right,
There's
Stoops
stories
is
about
yeah,
that guy.
yeah. But, you know, Reprise is another.
Oh yeah.
I'm not big on cover bands, but I find it really interesting how many there are here. And how does that
I mean,
influence you?
my take on the jam cover band thing is like, you know, I played with Zach, who's very by the book. Like this, it was almost felt like a novelty act where it was like we have a lot of, you know, boomers coming up to us after the show being like, that reminded me of when I used to see the Dead, and that's sweet. But my personal favorite is just, it's like, okay, I'm using Phish and I'm using Dead songs to improv with my friends, because no one's gonna come out and see my band like Crunch Boogie, like they don't know who the hell we are. But if we are a Dead cover band, we're gonna have all these people there, and then we'll have a crowd that we can improv to, and we just, like, we play these songs, great. Play a 4-minute song, and then you do a 20-minute improv, and people are there for it because it's under the pretense of being Grateful Dead music. And so that's the reality of the jam cover scene, at least. And then then you got a band like Reprise, who is arguably better than Phish at their instruments. They are. I mean, trust me.
Whoa, cool.
Controversy.
Everybody calm down. Phish is my favorite band in the world. I'm just
No, I
saying,
love Reprise.
the guys
Reprise
are,
is
they
awesome.
are next level musicians.
Ben Comedy's great, but he's not great on stage.
Absolutely not. I mean, none of them are any of the members of Phish. There's a magic there that's more than just technical ability. But the drummer Adrian,
Oh, he's
Fishman
one-
admitted himself that he was better than Phish.
Yeah, he's,
So
I love Adrian.
he's a phenomenal. I mean, so like to see their music played by musicians at that level is just really cool. And compared to my Phish cover band, which is just an excuse for me to jam, and we're not that great at the songs. We don't like spend hours and hours learning Reba perfectly and stuff like that, whereas Reprise definitely does.
Satan's Dogs.
Yeah, Satan's Dogs. And it's really just for fun, and I'm not even supposed to talk about it because I'm in Goose and we're not supposed to.
Okay.
We're not supposed to like Phish or whatever.
I actually have a follow-up for Michael, which is, and it's sort of from this, how many of the bands that you ended up writing about started as cover bands for somebody else? Like even Phish started playing Dead songs very
Great question.
Yeah, they all played covers for sure, but they all were very conscious of writing material. In some cities, the bars wanted, they only wanted originals, right? So like Blues Traveler and Spin Doctors in New York City, they couldn't roll up and play a ton of covers there was cover bars, and then there were non-cover bars. And if you wanted like real fans, you didn't play but this is back in the 80s, right? You know, some place like Athens, like Panic played the Dead a lot in their early days, but they would sprinkle everything. I mean, it's nothing like you see today. I mean, I don't know, Joe Russo's Almost Dead really, you know, took a catalog and the bones are there, but really made it, I think, their own. And like when I started going to see J-Rad shows, I was like, well, one, this is like the Dead on steroids, you know, in terms of like the speed.
Smarter.
But you know, they could do things, that they would segue in ways that you would never hear the Dead really do. And so I just think they took a catalog and wanted to make it their own. Kind of like what Cotter was saying, it was probably like just, you know, let's see if some people like some music, like we want to play some music while we're pursuing some other things. And it just really took off. Because I think a lot of people kind of have the same thought that they have these attachments to this catalog, they have these attachments to these songs, they mean so much to them. and they most likely heard them in really like rich and ripe coming of age moments in their life and never let go. And then to hear other musicians take a new approach on something so familiar, I mean, it's so attractive, you know? It's like, it's amazing. So that's my theory on the cover band rise. 37 in Vermont seems like a lot, but you know.
It's probably a
Mr. Charlie, no, what do you think?
But
there's a website that lists all of them, actually. It's like deadtracker.com or something. I forget. There's a website, so it
Yeah,
lists
yeah.
them all.
But at the end of the day, like people love, you know, we have, I don't know, they're called in my community, they're called like dad bands. Because they're like,
Dad rock?
well, they're not dad rock, they're dad bands, because it's a bunch of dads playing in a band. And they do this in their spare time, and they play some like little bars, but they have jobs, and it's just, they love it. There's like literally no expectations. And so some Phish dad bands are starting to pop up as well,
Sure.
which is great.
I
Yes.
mean,
I have a friend, my friend's band is called Louder Daddy, that's a dad band.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's funny that Nectars is known as a jam band institution, but when Phish started playing, they were more of an anomaly. There was a band called The Other Ones, that's all I can think of, but we have Nectar here, maybe you have questions for him about, Marty's gonna tell me, about
Yeah,
when they
it's-
started, because they were the only jam band that really played in Nectars. It was cover bands, original music, but not really jam bands. What do you think? I was a waitress.
Yeah, there's royalty here, Nectar and Rothwell. Thanks for coming. I mean, Trey, and when I was speaking to him, he certainly said he said the same thing, right? That it wasn't like this jam mecca. It was everything, and they would get a night and maybe graduate to a weekend, 3 nights, and just really make the most of it as much as possible. And they still have that mentality, I think, today, in terms of work ethics and practice.
Who came in to ask for the gig first? How did they book their first gig? Do you remember?
They just come up to me, they tell me, wanna play here? I said, what kind of music you play? Sometimes you say rock and roll or jazz or blues. Okay, they bring a CD, which honestly you never listen to. I trust them, and the music they're gonna play. My goal was to start on time, and whatever goes from there.
how was the music scene back then in Burlington? A lot of bands playing?
Strong.
A lot of young bands,
Yeah, a lot of young bands.
a local bands,
Talent, a lot of talent.
a lot of talent, no doubt about it. Sam Giacomoni was 14, 15 years old.
He's still doing it.
And not only that, he couldn't play after 9 o'clock. The law, because of his age, so I had to start his band earlier, so he can leave with his father and mother, go back home, to go to school the next day. He was travel all the way from White River.
But the fact that like people had these like homes to play and play out even at 14, and you're going home at 9 p.m. But like for a 14-year-old kid who has to go up to school the next morning Like, this is like, these are dreams come true, right? Like, this is like,
Just like the amount of bands that are playing here, I'm blanking on the name, but the band Trey Fantoni from the sax player who has a statue on Church Street.
Unknown
Yeah.
Unknown Blues Band?
Like the fact that there were all these amazing musicians inspiring the Phish boys. This community is what made that band what they are. For sure, it wasn't a jam band scene.
no, it wasn't, it was just people passing down knowledge.
For sure.
That's what it
Just
was.
music, man.
It was music.
Yeah. Which I love. I love when it's not just jam band stuff.
Yeah.
It's just music lovers, musicians who love to play music. You don't have to be a hippie or metalhead, you're just whatever, playing whatever, because you love music.
So to that point, I hated jam bands. I lived with a Phish band and absolutely hated them. And then I got into Goose because they were covering Bon Iver, Jim James, and other stuff that I'm a fan of.
For sure.
And I was like, oh, these guys are sick.
I mean, I think that's the appeal. I think that when I joined Goose, and I was kind of being like, what was it? What was the secret formula that separated these guys and brought them to maybe a higher level than most jam bands have gotten to since Phish? And I'm not trying to say this is like, we're great at all. I was legitimately curious, especially when I was in Swimmer and Goose opened for Swimmer at Nectars in 2017 or 18. And then they were playing Mohegan Sun and we were like, what the fuck? Like, when's our time? It was like, we weren't hating on Goose by any means, but we were jealous because we were working our asses off and we were like, how do these guys get so big? But we never gave them a chance. I never listened to Goose that much. And then once I talked to Rick for the first time and he kind of explained his approach, I was like, oh, this makes sense. You're connecting the contemporary music world with the jam world, and a lot of jam fans and jam players are really stuck in the old ways of like, we're gonna play classic rock covers and we're gonna do the same thing that Phish did or the Dead did. And so bringing it to the new music market, I think is a huge reason why Goose is successful.
I have a lot of friends that will not go anywhere near a jam band, but I send them your studio stuff and they absolutely love it.
Yeah, man, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, someone was asking me last week about, you know, is Goose the next Phish? Like what's their deal? And I was like, I mean, they all listen to it, but they have these other, so the threads are there.
Was Phish the next Grateful Dead?
Exactly. I was like, but you know, like, I saw them play Echo and the Bunnymen, The National, and Radiohead in the same show. Like, and those are acts that I love as well, and that have nothing to do with that. And it's just like, it's clear that there's an array of influences that when Phish was coming up and everybody's like, oh, you're the next Dead, they're like, not really. We listen to all these other things. No, you're the next Dead.
Media laziness?
Right. It's a little. Yeah. It's
It's
just
just the
totally
fact that
lazy.
they jam and then
But
they
it's
get
like-
lumped together by people who could care less about actually
Right.
listening to the music. If you don't like the songs or the approach, that is totally fine. But I think lumping everything together just means that you're lazy and you'd rather talk shit than give music a chance, or just shut up. And love what you love, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, love what you love. I mean, the whole point I was trying to make to this person was that, like, it evolves. Like, things evolve, and everybody has different influences, and so the answer is no. It's not going to be the same.
It's not the next Phish. I'll
it's-
set the record straight
Oh,
right
damn.
now.
Okay.
And like Phish is my favorite band, but I'm not trying to be Phish.
Of course.
And obviously, are they influential? For sure. But so is a ton of other stuff. And it's like, that's not our goal at all. I can say for sure. The goal is not to be the next Phish or the next Grateful Dead. But the community, jam community, I mean, that's something I've always been in with a bunch of other bands that aren't the two big ones. And I would love to have that be a part of like the Goose world.
Other question, Nectar, what's up?
I think the Phish was, timing was important. They hit the right time and marketing, and there were the people behind them to push them up on stage. Because remember, when they were playing, we're nervous. Right, Friday night, Saturday night, they had $2-3 cover charge. Sunday and Monday, they play in Nectars, and I have more people, and we're nervous.
Never a couple.
No
Never
problem.
a couple. 7
That's
nights
the
a week.
point. John Fishman won more money. I don't collect any money at the door. How can I give you more money?
We found it.
All right, we have one more question. Can we do one more
Okay,
question?
one more question.
Okay. Yes.
So, at least in my memory, in the jam scene, or like from the scene in the '90s, I feel like a lot of the bands were more balkanized, or like that they stuck to their like territories. And like nowadays, like in the modern jam scene, there seems to be so much more collaboration. Like, you know, I was down in Mexico, and like you guys were sitting in with, you know, Eggy and Dogs in the Pile, and it was just and Dogs, and it was just like so amazing and collaborative. And is this just like kind of because of the way, you know, the music industry was in the '90s, where it was built more upon the traditional record label model, versus now so many more bands are independent, and like by like kind of growing together, you're kind of fueling each other's, you know, careers and fan bases?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, especially us inviting those non-jam bands in that have like a totally, like War on Drugs and Dawes, who we love. Like Dawes is one of my favorite bands of all time. That drummer is amazing and a great dude. But it's also just like, yeah, we all want, it's not even, I mean, I would love to believe it's not like this market-driven thing where like, we're gonna collect all of this new fan base. It's just like, we love the music. And it doesn't, like I've kind of been alluding to this whole time, it's like, we want to promote this thing where it's like, we're not just jam guys, we're not just hippies jamming out. It's like, it's all the same, man. Just because we play a 20-minute improv song doesn't mean we have to have this specific group of fans that are just jam people. That's kind of the goal, I think, with the Goose approach, at least the way we talk about it. And that kind of shows that in real life. And that's also just because we love their music, and then they respect us, which is cool. They don't just be like, they're not just like, oh, they're just a jam band. They like our tunes, and it ends up building both of our markets because we're trying to grow an audience of music lovers rather than this kind of more like dedicated. Like a lot of jam fans are very dedicated. I've been dedicated, snobby, kind of a douchebag when it comes to Phish, being like, this is the good stuff. I'm an authority, but I wasn't. And then I'm like, now I'm following my ways.
You're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's about music, man, at the end of the day. It gets pretty weird when it gets all grouped up in terms of the fans. But also, people love to be on a team and have pride in their community, and that's not a bad thing. People loving each other and having that common ground of like, we both love Phish, we must have something in common. That's a beautiful part of the scene too. So it's not that simple. It's not so cut and dry. You know?
To that point too, like with Goose, my first show was 2021 at Terminal 5, and now watching you guys, I know you weren't there then, but like watching them go to bigger and bigger and bigger venues, and then seeing the same songs I saw with 2,000 people, with 20,000 people, it's like, it feels personal. It's like, I knew they were the shit,
Oh, yeah,
and now I'm fucking right.
I love that. Sure. That's awesome.
Thanks everybody, this was awesome. Thanks for coming out.